Hey everyone, Sean Frangella here with a new 15-minute tip video about some workflow tips from going from Premiere to After Effects and some different options and ways you can get your editing footage into After Effects to do post-production, compositing, and effects. So I've gotten a lot of questions about this lately of how do I get my footage into After Effects and what's the best way and different workflows. And since I do a lot of work in After Effects, Premiere is definitely my tool of choice for quite a few reasons, and that's some things I want to cover today. We'll start here in Premiere. I have this short little sequence that I've shot of my wife having superpowers, and if we look at the final piece, we get this where there's three little shots. There's stabilization and time remapping and some particles in the first shot, particles and stabilization in the second one, and then this third shot has stabilization, time remapping, 2D tracking, 3D tracking, smoke effects, particles, and a lot of stuff going on. So I'll use this as an example of how to get this footage into After Effects, whether we want to send the whole thing with a little bit of effects and touches from Premiere, as well as if we were doing this as a sequence of mostly editing and maybe just wanted to send one shot over to After Effects and back. So I'm here in Premiere. I have this at the point of editing, and I have three little shots set up, and all I've done to change them really is I've time remapped them to slow them down a bit because they were shot at 60 frames a second. So if I go to speed duration on any of these, I can see that they're at 80 and this one's at 80, and you can also see in the brackets that they're at 80, 80, 40. And this is important because this is stuff I would want to retain when I send After Effects, and this workflow allows me to do that as opposed to other editing software. So what's nice about this is there's a lot of the same effects and properties for footage, such as opacity, position, scale, rotation, as well as a lot of the same effects that we're used to seeing in After Effects, like blurs and curves. And we can start to do some of that in Premiere, and it will read in After Effects if we go through this workflow. So to make a point of that, I'm just going to do a couple little things with any of these pieces of footage. If I double click on them, it comes up in the source window, and I can go to effect controls, and then I have my motion as well as my opacity and time remapping that is dropped on just because, again, I've done speed duration. Now I want this clip to fade in and blur in just to make a point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the first frame, make a keyframe for opacity, make sure I'm at 0, and I'm going to make a keyframe for opacity, put it at 0, then go ahead 15 frames by doing shift right arrow 3 times, and then make another keyframe, put it at 100, make sure this first one was at 0 because it looks like it's at 1, and I'm also going to add a fast blur effect just because that's something that carries over in After Effects, and I want to make a point of that. So in effects, I'm going to type in fast to get fast blur, drag that onto this footage, and it's going to pop up in my effects controls, and I'm going to put that at 100, and same as After Effects, I have my same controls if I can repeat edge pixels. And then for blurriness, I'm going to make a keyframe, and I'll slide that over to the beginning of my footage, and then I'm going to make it at 0 here. And now if I watch this, I have my blur and fade in, and that's nice, and I might be able to just skip with that in editing, but it's good to know that that'll carry over later. Now, there are a lot of the same effects for basic stuff from After Effects in Premiere also, like the warp stabilizer, for an example, which I used on all these clips. However, because I've time remapped them, it's going to give me a warning that I can't use warp stabilizer and speed, and I can't necessarily pre-compose things in Premiere. So this is a good point to why this would have to go to After Effects. So I have my 3 clips. I'm going to save my project, and if I want to send this whole sequence into After Effects, what I can do is jump into After Effects or start it up if I don't have it open, and then I'm going to go to File, Import, Adobe Premiere Pro Project, not just the basic imports. I'm going to find my project, click Open. It's going to ask me if I want to select all sequences. That's fine. And what it's going to do is bring in all of my footage as well as my sequences as compositions. So I had a lot of other stuff in here, but I put it in original, so I have all of my original footage from this whole project. And then I have this main edit 1, which was my Premiere sequence. And now if I double click that, I have a composition that is all of this footage that's been brought over. And what's nice is it's not destructive, so I still have my handles if I wanted to make any editing changes at this point. Maybe once I start to do effects, I still want to change some things. And if I press U, you can see that it's brought in my opacity and fast blur keyframes for that footage. So that's nice because it's not destructive and burning that in from Premiere. The other thing that's came over is the timer mapping. So if I right click on this and in After Effects, we'd find this under time stretch. You can see that it's stretched it to 125, which is equal to, in this case, 80%. And again, it's all non-destructive. It's sending over this information, but still allowing me to change it because there's a connection between these two programs, which is nice. So now what I could do is do all of my compositing that I would do in After Effects. I could stabilize both of these clips, do all sorts of color correction, maybe throw adjustment layers on there to do a bunch of curves and color correction and stuff like that. But that isn't really what I want to talk about today. As you can see, there's a lot of compositing going on in this shot, and my wife's really throwing the snow around and having powers, and who knows what's going to happen next. But I just want to point out the benefits of the workflow. So then when we're done with this, we could go to Composition, add to Adobe Media Encoder Queue or Render Queue, and render this whole thing out however we want to as a final piece with sound or without sound or whatever we're doing with it next. And it would pop open Adobe Media Encoder Queue if you went that route here. And then I have my Adobe Media Encoder Queue, and I could check all my render settings and press play to render it out, and I'd be done. Now, that workflow works really great if you need to send the whole project over, and in this case, that was appropriate because if we look at this, there's a high level of stuff and After Effects compositing and parts going on in every shot, so there wasn't anything that was just shot from production and not needing to go to After Effects. However, as is often the case with editing projects, sometimes it's just one or two shots that need compositing and the rest you want to keep in editing and not have to send the whole project over if there's like 300 cuts and there's only 2 shots that are your big visual effects pieces. So as an alternative, sometimes you'll want to send just one shot over, and there's this great dynamic link connection to do that. So I want to show that as another option. So what I'm going to do is actually quit After Effects, and this is an important step because if I already had it open, it's going to make my dynamic link connection in my current project, and I wouldn't want that because things can get kind of weird sometimes, or if I'm already working on something, and all that will make sense in a minute. So I'm just going to quit After Effects altogether and make sure it's not open in this case. And now we're in Premiere, and let's say that this shot is fine, but I want to send over these 2 shots, and I'm going to do a lot of compositing there, but not on this one. Or assume that this was a much longer sequence and there's 2 little ones. What I can do is grab any parts of footage and then right-click, replace with After Effects composition, and what that's going to do is make a dynamic link and pop open After Effects and connect the 2 programs. However, one step I want to do before that is I'm going to, in my project window, copy and paste my sequence, and then for my own naming purposes, I'm just going to call this main edit 1 for AE. And here's why I'm going to do that. As we can see, once I grab this and right click and replace with After Effects composition, it's going to start up After Effects, and the first thing it's going to do is ask me to save this file. It's going to pop up in this window as soon as After Effects gets open, and this is one reason why I wouldn't want to have it open. It's because I want to have a clean start for this project and the little parts that we're bringing in After Effects. So I'm just going to save this as, let's call this edit main compositing, and it's going to bring in as a new sequence just those 2 clips, again with handles so I can edit it, and links to just those 2 pieces of footage. Now if I go back to Premiere, what I'm going to have is this reddish pink block that's replaced those 2 clips, and that's why I would want to duplicate this original sequence, is because this is a destructive process and there's not an easy way to go back to that in case I did want to back up and make editing changes, or I did this too soon. I personally like to have a copy that's not sent, and then here's my for After Effects one with this linked comp, and we can see in our footage it's made this little extra piece of footage with a link icon, and this is this dynamic link. Now why this is useful is because any changes we make in After Effects, so just as an example, I'm just going to do something that we couldn't do in Premiere, so I'll just make a new adjustment layer, and I'll do something like camera lens blur, and just maybe have it start really out of focus or something, as well as if we were thinking if we want to do any other effects out of everything that we could do in After Effects, So what's happening is once I save this After Effects project and go back over to Premiere, you can see that it took a second and it's going to update that. So the benefit of this is I can send just my one clip over that I need to do compositing in After Effects on. In this case, for whatever reason, if the only thing I was doing was adding an unnecessary lens blur on it. And then it's going to link that, and when I, from Premiere, do file export media, it's going to render all of that together. So the benefit of this is it saves me the time of having to render out one little clip separately, if that's all I'm doing compositing, and then having to render that composited part back over in After Effects. And again, just to make a point, if I hide this and I'll do something like layer, new, solid, and maybe add a plugin. I like to use a lot of Video Copilot optical flares, and I'll go into options. And again, this is just to make a point of this connection. I'm going to add some stuff I like and put it on transparent. And this is something that I did use with a lot more work in the original composite, and I'll save this. And again, I go over to Premiere and go over to this clip, and this obviously doesn't look good, but the point is that I don't have to render stuff out separately, and it's going to link everything. So it's a huge time saver, and is one of the reasons why I like using Premiere as editing software. Having been someone who did a lot of After Effects and was familiar with a lot of the Adobe interfaces, it's really easy to pick up because of that, and because it works all the same, and because it's all Adobe programs. They work really well back and forth and are planned to be connected and make it a lot more of a seamless workflow, as opposed to having these compartmentalized processes where you have to render out each subclip, then bring it into the compositing software to do your compositing, then render it back out, and just waste a lot of time. And just not be able to spend as much time working creatively, but thinking more about all these little parts of the process and all these little steps and rendering stuff out. So it can be a useful little tip when you're working in editing and need to send to After Effects. I hope this was useful for everyone. And as usual, if you want to check out my other motion graphics, animation, Cinema 4D, compositing tutorials, be sure to subscribe on YouTube and Vimeo /Sean Frangella, as well as Facebook.com/Vital if you want to ask questions or interact in that way. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you at the next video.